Hi, I'm Jonathan Frizz. I'm here with Greg Healy. We are talking about fear and greed as drivers of the economy. So, Greg, what I'm hearing you say, as unbelievable as this may be, is that if our motives in an economic system going in are fear and greed, that might mess up the whole system.
Yeah, it does cause some trouble.
It causes some trouble. I mean, I've heard all kinds of things. I've heard the phrase "greed is good."
Sure.
That famous film about the '80s and the
Right.
stock market, and where they had those really ancient cell phones.
Sure.
And greed is good. I've heard all these different. But how else can we establish an economy, or to phrase the question a different way, how do we get disentangled with this? If this is in at the core,
Yes.
how is it possible to get disentangled
Sure.
from this system? Because we're all have to buy things and sell things, and we're all involved in it. How do we get disentangled?
Well, I'll start with the disentangling. I think that our economy or our financial markets are going to run into difficulty. We've
Okay.
seen that in the past. We know the markets go in cycles. But we also know that something that's man-made like this, that's being driven in the way that it is eventually going to fall apart.
Well, why do we know that? Talk about that a little more. I just want to understand why. How can you be so sure about that? You sound so sure. Certainty here. I'm seeing it on your face. So
Yeah.
how can we know that something like this is going to fall apart? It's going to unravel.
Well, I think there's two ways we can know. One is that God speaks it, and if God is saying that these markets are not going to last, and biblically we know that. We know that all of these present systems or structures will eventually go away.
Right.
Just like every ancient empire has eventually gone away, like the Roman Empire or the Babylonian Empire has gone away, so too will systems like this. If they're not built on the foundation of God, they will not last. We know that, right?
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
biblical truth.
Okay, I got you.
Now that's long term and what have you, but we're talking about maybe in the shorter run. So we need to understand and hear, is God saying that these markets will enter into more difficulty? I believe He is. Other people may not want to hear that or believe that. That's okay. You can also look at the fundamental factors that are driving our markets. And one of the major issues we are dealing with is indebtedness. And indebtedness has not gone away since the last financial crisis of 2008. It's still out there and it's still looming. And servicing that debt is like this hamster wheel. You have to keep servicing debt, or otherwise debt gobbles you alive. If debt keeps increasing, the question is it sustainable and for how long? So that's why I would contend that the good days of the markets are not around forever.
Sure. I mean, there's been a lot of press lately. Markets are doing pretty well.
Sure.
It seems like we've recovered, but you're saying it's a hamster wheel. You can't keep running forever. Eventually, that hamster is going to crash.
Yeah, and I'll get more specific. How's that? I mean, what I felt like God was saying in the financial crisis of 2008 through Ezekiel was actually that this was the beginning of troubles, not the end. So everyone has their own opinion about what will happen, and we all hope for the best, and as we should.
Right.
But if we know what's sustaining these markets or driving them is ultimately not a good thing, even if the benefits of it, having money, making money, having income, seem worth it, in the end, we know they're really not, because God can sustain us no matter what if we trust Him at His word. And I think that's what really leads to the second part of your question, which is, okay, so if not this, then what?
Right. How do we get disentangled? What's the alternative?
Yeah, so how do we get disentangled, to finish that thought, is our hand will be forced. So if we have trouble in the economy, trouble in the markets, trouble in our banking system, which we have had in the past, by the way. Currencies have failed, banks have failed, there have been runs on banks. We quickly forget that in today's day, in the 21st century, but that's actually recent history, even in the United States. It's even more recent history in other nations like Argentina and Germany and so forth.
Right.
So how do we get disentangled? I think the voluntary method is very difficult because everyone likes the income that these markets may produce for them if they're an investor. And indeed, we all have become investors in a sense because our retirements are wrapped up in this. So, again, back to many aspects of today's U.S. economy are integrally tied to the success of the financial markets. So that's what that's why it's difficult to separate from it.
Sure.
So premise is that we are handle be forced. We won't have a choice if we enter into difficult times. Those times could look like the Great Depression. Those times could look like other market crashes, other bank runs, other problems. So the answer to the second part of the question, though, is what's its replacement? What do you do instead?
Right.
Do we just, hope for the best and float around on clouds and strum harps like up in heaven? Is that the plan? Commerce is a good thing. It's a necessary thing. It's a wonderful thing. But again, it's back to why are you doing business? And so what replaces it is instead of an economy, markets and therefore an economy driven by fear and greed, those factors have to be driven towards faith in God. Okay, so what is the antithesis of fear? It is faith. Because if we fear for our own self.
Right.
We fear for our own demise. If out of that fear, often we try to control that fear, right?
Right.
So the opposite to that, if we trust God, is to believe in him, that he can make a way, even when it looks bad. So if we have trouble in the markets, if we have trouble in the economy, and we have faith in God, we can trust him. So in the basis of that faith, then we can change our paradigm of how we do business together. If I'm no longer looking at you as my way of surviving,
right, the lamb chop.
The lamb chop, you become my host. I have to shoot you so I can eat. That's kind of the fear and greed model.
Yeah, I get a little nervous when you call me a lamb chop. I'm just going to be honest. It just makes me feel uncomfortable.
Buttercup better?
So yeah, you're going to kill me and eat me.
Yes.
Now, we've got that far.
Okay.
But there's an alternative, I hope.
Yeah, the alternative is this. When I work with you as in a relationship, in a business context, I'm buying something from you, I'm selling something to you, you perform a service for me or I render a service to you. Whatever that context is, if we stop looking at it primarily as how am I going to make money from this, and we start looking at it as how can I help this person?
Right.
How can I give and sow into them and invest into them so that they are benefited and we will be fine too? What you have to do in order to do that is you have to leave the rest up to God. So instead of saying business is about money, I'll only do business with you if there's money in it for me, I instead say business is about people and I'm going to enter into this because I'm going to help you in business. I'm going to help you in this transaction, in this situation, and we'll leave how I get provided for and the income or the profit up to God.
Wow. So it's a real dramatic. I'm reminded of that scripture that says it's more blessed to give
That is correct.
than to receive.
And so you've put the words right into the explanation of what does this economy look like? What is this financial system, God's new breed, new way of doing things? What does it look like? It is an economy based on giving and receiving. Instead of making money and taking what's mine and trying to force your hand, I'm leaving room for God to work by faith. So we do business together. I'm not going to drive every nickel and dime out of our relationship. I'm going to do what's well and right in our eyes and objectively, perhaps in our community's eyes. And then we'll leave the rest up to God.
I like that better than the lamb chop way.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
We'll be back in just a second to talk about other things related to this new way of doing business.